And we always have to remember that the lies told to us about our exceptional megalithic ancestors are really without number. The lies disseminated about the Arya are also most pernicious. The very word Aryan has been thoroughly and deliberately misinterpreted. It referred not to a race, but to a caste. Specifically, it referred to the intellectual, spiritual, and moral status of any human being, regardless of their racial background. In Proto-Indo-European, the root is Aryo. In Iranian, the rendition is Asha. In Hindi, the root was Urta. In Greek, the renditions were arete, meaning virtue, or aristos, meaning best, like in Aristotle, the philosopher, and ortho, meaning orthodox. In Latin, it was rectus, or erectus, meaning upstanding, right, or true. In German, it was recht, meaning right. It also appeared as Reich, or more correctly, Areich, as in the names Rick or Arik, meaning rich or high, like the names Richard and Eric, etc. In English, it appears as right, and also as terms such as Aries, art, aristocracy, arable, area, and Haris. In Sanskrit, it was Arya, meaning kind, favored, excellent, or devoted. Secondary meanings are lord, master, noble, respected. The root appears in personal names such as Aryabhata and Aaron, and in numerous place names such as Benares, Ara, Aryavarta, Sumeria, Bulgaria, Armenia, Iran, Ireland, and Eric. In Origins and Evolution of Religion, Albert Churchward wrote, "It is stated on a parchment found in a brick wall in the foundations of Dendera at the time of King Pepi, the Great Pyramid was built by the followers of Horus. The stellar cult people were the followers of Horus in the same sense as the Christians are followers of Christ. The architect who drew the plans was Nu-Er-Nub Ari, and his title was the Keeper of the Secrets." Now the Irish stag god was known as Herne, and also Cernunnos. The word Hermes comes from the Irish Herne. Hermes was the Greek god of wisdom and secret knowledge. The horns that were once the symbol of divinity, spiritual wisdom, and mystical rank can still be seen in the spiked crowns worn by monarchs. In the Bible, we hear of Jesus and his so-called crown of thorns. Is this yet another cryptic reference to Druidism in the scriptures? Certainly. After all, the Druids employed the idea of a cruciform tree thousands of years before the advent of Christianity. Their sun king, who was hung on a tree of life, was Iesa, or Isus. The very word God derives from got, a word that originally meant the goat. Here he is, Herne the hunter, the ancient stag god of Druidism, wearing the original crown of thorns. The serpent and torque serve as his ring and rod. These are the key symbols of royalty, but spiritually they represent biunity, the nucleation of the masculine and feminine polarities, and the unification of microcosm and macrocosm. They represent the so-called chemical wedding of the alchemists and mystery school adepts. The bracelet or torque of the prehistoric Herne appears during the Queen's ceremony. During the anointing and consecration, 4 knights of the Order of the Garter bring a canopy over the seat and over the Queen. At this time, shielded from public view, the Queen is spoken to by the Archbishop of Canterbury. What passes between the two is not known. This scene was edited from the televised record. The Queen is head of the Knights of the Garter, that was allegedly founded in the 14th century by Edward III. She wears the order's tunic here, and the emblem with the solar rays and red cross. Of course, in part 1, we thoroughly discussed not only the symbolism of the red cross and its origin, but of the blue belt or garter that surrounds it. We also discussed the symbolism of the solar rays. Here are some crests and emblems of the Order of the Garter, carved for the Queen and on display at the palace. Note the owl, the serpent, and the phoenix, symbolizing Akhenaten. Of course, the serpent is a symbol to be found on the medical corporations, and the owl also, and it's the symbol of the Bohemian Society. Is connected to the Roman goddess Minerva. The symbol of the blue garter, as well as the red cross symbol, referred to as St. George's Cross, belonged to the Egyptian god Set. He was worshipped by the Hyksos pharaohs, the Shasu or shepherd kings, who during and after the time of Akhenaten became the Atonists. The Atonists conquered Britain approximately 600 years BC. This is the reason why Egyptian symbolism appears on so much British and European heraldry. The lunar queen becomes the solar queen. After being anointed, Elizabeth is clothed in a golden robe. She resumes her place on the chair and is presented with an unsheathed, jeweled sword. The female queen takes the sword of Mars from the male knight. This interaction between the queen and knight is a key aspect of the ceremony. Its secret is revealed by way of an understanding of astrology and tarot. On the bottom left we see a tarot card named the Queen of Swords, corresponding with this aspect of the ceremony. The image of the royal lady holding the Martian sword can be seen in the tarot card named the Queen of Swords. This court card is also associated with the sign of Libra. Now Libra is the 7th sign of the 12. Importantly, it is the direct opposite of the sign of Aries. Aries is ruled by the planet Mars, and the symbol of Mars is, as we have said, the sword. Moreover, the sign of Aries is especially revered by Atonists. After all, it was during the age of Aries, approximately 1400 BC, that Pharaoh Akhenaten instigated the exclusive worship of Aton. Egypt was brought to wreck and ruin due to his fanaticism. Eventually, after 17 years of religious despotism, the crazed pharaoh was exiled. The queen represents the feminine Libra, because of this sign's astrological opposition with the masculine Aries. The coronation is, therefore, not only an astrological rite, but an alchemical one. It is a form of hieros gamos, or chemical wedding. The archbishop approaches and says, "With this sword do justice." The tarot card which corresponds to the sign of Libra is known as Justice, and it is card number 11. The queen stands and walks towards the altar to return the sword. She resumes the throne, and the archbishop then brings forth the bracelets of sincerity and wisdom. As we saw, these bracelets again originate from Irish mythology. And according to one legend, Moses gave his own bracelets to a Gaedel, the son of Noel, the Milesian, or Atonist, who brought them to Ireland after leaving Egypt. The ceremonial bracelets are given to the queen as bonds between her and her people, and also as symbols of protection, embracing you on every side, defending you against all enemies, bodily or ghostly. So here we have an intensely occult ritual, in which many of the actual rites are to do with protection, protecting the queen against all sorts of attack, against all sorts of enemies, in this world, in the incarnate world, and in the discarnate world, and the spiritual and astral planes. The queen is then adorned in the golden imperial robe. It is another symbol of protection. Immediately afterward, she is also presented with the orb, which is the world under Christ's dominion, and the ring of sapphire and ruby. In her right hand she holds the scepter of kingly power and justice, and in her left hand She holds the rod of equity and mercy. This part of the rite corresponds with the Kabbalistic schemata of the Tree of Life and its masculine and feminine pillars, known as mercy and severity. These pillars are the Jachin and Boaz of Masonry. The central path on the Tree of Life is made up entirely of feminine paths, as they are called. This central pillar, named Equilibrium, would be the body of the Queen herself, as we can see in the tarot card on the top in the center, card number 2, the High Priestess. We see the black and white pillars of Boaz and Jachin. We see the body of the female goddess. We see the pomegranate tree behind her. We see the number 2, and we see the cross. Then, on the extreme right, we see the last card of the tarot, the dancing female holding the 2 scepters or wands in exactly the same way as the Queen is holding the 2 scepters or wands. And about her, as we can see in this card that's called the World, we see the 4 cardinal figures again, the 4 cardinal points. Now, Albert Pike has something monumental and fascinating to say about the obelisk. In the Book of Enoch, he said, in speaking of the fallen angels, it is said, the name of the first is Yakun. He it was who seduced all the sons of the holy angel, and causing them to descend on earth, led astray the offspring of men. And the name, as Yakain, is fitly represented by a phallic column. Well, Yakun is obviously the Jakun or Jachin, one of the pillars at the gates of Solomon or Aton's temple. We see these 2 stately pillars at the portals of all Masonic lodges and at important government buildings. These phallic altars to Lucifer or Aton can be found in most civic centers of the world as the obelisk, the tower, or a single erect stone monument. They stand in the center of prominent city squares and near important banks, churches, and educational institutions. The very word phallic comes from phallos, which means white or bright, and it's akin to phaos, that also means light. Albert Pike said, by the very name, it, the phallus, was connected with the sun. So where we have the solar symbols, we also have the phallic symbols. And the great phallic obelisk represented the fallen angel, the one who led men astray. And these phallic columns are to be found in the most important cities of the world, and very, very close to the houses of government and religion. Here is the front cover of Sir Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, featuring the Masonic Jachin and Boaz. Here we have the Jachin and Boaz with the Egyptian pyramid in Israel. So again, the obelisk, the phallus of Lucifer, god of light, a cardinal Atonist symbol, and now we have some idea of why it would have been incorporated into civic design in this particular way. Well, the idea of 2 pillars is not Jewish but Egyptian. As said, Jachin and Boaz are based on the esoteric, so-called Kabbalistic tradition, and on the Tree of Life's pillars entitled Mercy and Severity. These terms apparently also refer to 2 ancient symbols of royalty, namely the crook and flail of the pharaohs. Egyptian pharaohs bore the symbol of the crook and also the flail or whip. This symbol of the flail connoted self-mastery and not dominance over others, as lying experts contend. Interestingly, the Hyksos pharaohs were known as the shepherd kings. The king of Egypt was regarded as a seer. He was the shepherd. This term distinguished him as a master astrologer, because the flocks were the stars of heaven. On Queen Elizabeth's shoulder there is what appears to be 2 tassels, but which may be in fact a figurative Egyptian flail. It's a case of old pharaohs and new pharaohs. It's a case of meet the new boss, it's the same as the old boss. And what's more, we see the ring and the rod in exactly the same way as we saw in the ancient picture of Herne the Hunter, in the Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian images of the goddess Lilith, who holds them, and also in the priest kings of ancient Sumeria and Babylon, who held the same symbols of royalty, the sphere and the rod, the ring and the rod, the 1 and the 0. In Genesis 49, chapter 10, we read, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his." So again, an idea of waiting, an idea of one who is to come, and the importance of the scepter. Of course, we find the royal scepter not only in the House of Lords. Troublesomely, we find it in the House of Commons. Ultimately, the House of Commons cannot open without the right of placing the Queen's mace. The oligarch has the power, regardless of what the common public are led to believe. Everything is commissioned under the name of royalty and oligarchy. Now the Archbishop raises the crown high above the Queen's head before setting it in place. Suggestively, nothing organic exists during the ceremony, and men alone